News time is 8 minutes after 8 o'clock on this Monday. Top of the morning from the newsroom of Regional Radio at DeWittDailyNews.com. I'm Seth Lawrence with this expanded 8 o'clock newscast brought to you by Connexus Fiber Internet in Clinton. Click their icon at DeWittDailyNews.com to find out more. We also stream to Facebook and YouTube. Brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin insurance agent in Clinton. The DeWitt County Genealogical Society is honoring the community by restoring its gravestones. Terry Lemmel with the DeWitt County Genealogical Society explains Woodlawn Cemetery has many graves of Civil War soldiers, but over many years, some are missing and others are in need of restoration.
Anyone who lives in Clinton is surely familiar with Woodlawn Cemetery and how huge it is. The entire cemetery began with the burial of one soldier in 1861 from the Civil War, and his father owned that property, and he was buried up on the hill. And a few months later, 5 more men from Clinton were killed at the Battle of Fort Donelson. They were buried next to him, and it just extrapolated from there. But today, there is still in that one area called the Soldier's Plot in the old section of the cemetery, there are 80 Civil War veterans buried there. And of course, those tombstones are 150 years old or more, so they need help. A lot of them are crooked, and you know, the ground tries to swallow up stones. A couple of them are completely missing.
The initiative seeks to clean up and restore the Woodlawn Cemetery and honor fallen veterans. Lemmel notes the project should cost around $2,000.
We have a project going on to complete those things and to preserve that cemetery. You know, it's usually the focal point of our Memorial Day celebrations. Right. So the first Memorial Day, which was called Decoration Day then, began in 1868, and it was a big deal in Clinton. We had, at that time, there were 40 graves there of men who were veterans who died during the war years. There was a huge parade, and there were 40 women dressed in white with wreaths that came and put wreaths on each grave, and there was a huge crowd that went to that. And even today, when we do our Memorial Day program, it usually culminates at that location there in the cemetery. So I feel it's important that we preserve it, and it's not going to be free, but it's not going to cost a lot of money either. So I think that we can complete this whole project for about $2,000. And that includes replacing the sign and fixing the tombstones.
Lemmel invites the public to participate in cleaning up the soldiers' graves. She says there are 6 open spots in a class volunteers would need to take to learn the process.
However, to repair the tombstones, we need some volunteers. So I have arranged with the Department of Natural Resources. Don Cobb there is in charge of cemetery preservation, and John Hyder is a cemetery preservation specialist who'll be working with us. And they're going to do a workshop at the library on June 21st. And the Genealogical Society is going to be allowed 6 participants. The whole class is limited to 12, but they wanted to keep 6 spots open for the public. Mm-hmm. And it's $75 a person to take this class. It's a textbook learning in the morning at the library, and then hands-on training at the Soldier's Plot in the afternoon. They'll show you the basics, and then you can take that knowledge and show others how it's done. There's a particular procedure for lifting those gravestones and setting them, level and everything. There are even a couple of gravestones that are broken in half. That can be repaired. There are at least 2 tombstones that I'm hoping I can get replacements from the Veterans Administration.
Lemmel hopes to raise enough funds to cover the $75 cost for participants. She's happy to accept donations and will be searching for grants to pay for
And
it.
then I want to raise enough money to pay for the 6 volunteers that I'm putting in the class. So if you volunteer for this project, your class would be paid for. I'd be happy to accept donations. And I have a couple of possible grants that I can go after. The projected completion date for this project is Memorial Day of 2026. And that'll be just in time to celebrate the nation's 250th birthday. The whole project, I think, is going to run about $2,000.
Lemmel, to learn more about volunteering and all things DeWitt County Genealogical Society, visit DeWittCountyGenealogycalSociety.com. This spring has been one for the books. Ed Shimon at the National Weather Service in Lincoln indicates there have been 43 tornadoes in Illinois so far this spring, and rainfall in most of the state has been well above average.
It appears like we've had just a really big temperature difference between Canada and the Gulf states. So we're kind of in the jet stream pattern of southwest and northeast jet stream, because the jet stream basically lines up where there's temperature differences that are large over smaller distances. And we just had a bullseye of that particular frontal boundary right across, the heart of the United States for, I don't know how many weeks. It may oscillate a little north, a little south, but it's always been somewhere in the vicinity of Illinois for the last 4 weeks. And it was just crazy the way that's set up. I'd want to say, oh, there's a Bermuda high, but it wasn't really that. It just seemed like, there was some Canadian high pressure that kind of stagnated a little bit. That just set us up for everything coming out of the Rockies was always getting targeted right towards Illinois, Tennessee, Kentucky area, and we just took the brunt of that one.
Shipman indicates most of Illinois has been spared from extreme tornadoes, although there has been some devastating severe weather in pockets of Illinois. The most impactful part of the crazy weather has been the rainfall totals, particularly in southern Illinois.
None of them have been extreme tornadoes, thankfully. We've had no loss of life in Illinois, which is very good, because we did have a moderate risk. And that tends to lead towards some tornadoes that could possibly, cause loss of life. But we were lucky there. Nothing, impactful in terms of whole cities getting cleared out. But we did have a lot of, outbuildings. Some homes had some roof damage, siding damage, a lot of tree damage, a lot of power outages. So those were the primary impacts there. Although anytime your power goes out, that's never a good thing. And then the southern part of the state just got hammered with rain, about a foot of rain in the Ohio River Valley, and as much as 8 to 10 inches as far north as I-70, just south of DeWitt County. But so the impacts in central Illinois have been a lot of tornadoes, but nothing major, a lot of outbuildings and stuff like that. But that rain down south is leaving a mark, and we're still dealing with that. Since we're the state liaison office, I work with the Emergency Management Agency down in the Illinois Emergency Management Agency at the State Emergency Operations Center. So we've been partially activated there for the better part of a week now, where we provide them briefings and situation reports and let them know that where the resources are needed and whatnot. The impacts have been pretty far reaching.
According to Shimon, most of Illinois is out of the windows of drought. However, he points out there are some areas in northern Illinois still dealing with even moderate drought. Social Security is strengthening the process to prove identity related to direct deposit information, and the new procedures will take effect today. This applies to some individuals applying for monthly benefits and those already receiving benefits if they need to change their direct deposit information. Jack Myers says the easiest and most secure way is online with a personal My Social Security account.
Seth, this is an important topic that I want to make sure listeners hear and understand, because we have been getting a lot of phone calls about this. I think there are a lot of misconceptions out there. People think that a lot of people, everybody are going to have to come in and prove their identity to continue getting their Social Security. And the reality is that that's simply not true. It is not true that everybody has to come into a Social Security office to prove their identity. So what is happening is Social Security is strengthening the process to prove identity related to direct deposit information. This is going to apply to individuals who need to provide initial direct deposit information when applying for monthly benefits, and to people who are already receiving benefits if they need to change their direct deposit information.
However, there are some misconceptions that everybody who receives Social Security or SSI must prove their identity. Meyer stresses this is not true. If applying for benefits or changing direct deposit information for existing benefits, the secure and most convenient way to prove identity is using a personal My Social Security account with Social Security's online services. Those applying for retirement, survivors, or auxiliary spouse or child benefits must visit a Social Security office to prove their identity. Myers points out changing direct deposit information for any type of benefit must prove their identity in a Social Security office, and receiving payment by paper check must visit a Social Security office before changing their mailing address. For more information about proving your identity, visit ssa.gov and look for the link What to Know About Proving Your Identity. News time is 18 minutes after 8 o'clock. We stream to Facebook and YouTube this morning, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. News brought to you by Connexus Fiber Internet in Clinton. Click their icon at DeWittDailyNews.com to find out more. We take a look at local sports next.